Space is a dangerous place, so you need to make sure you're ready for everything out there waiting in the darkness. Sometimes a towel just isn't enough. Sometimes you need a powerful starship. The Star Trek universe is filled with ships that are fast, powerful, and well-armed. It's not just the Federation that has them. Multiple galactic organizations have their own ships needed to dominate their respective territories. Without them, it can be incredibly difficult to maintain an empire, no matter how impressive your warriors are. Obviously, in this list, you're going to notice, where are those 32nd century ships? Wouldn't literally any of them paste some of these? And our answer to that is that they're probably going to get their own list. Because, you know, some of these ships wouldn't stand a chance. So we needed to have at least a bit of help for everyone. Some of the best episodes of every Star Trek series feature impressive space battles, pitting these ships against each other. In some cases, the ships are facing off one-on-one, in other times it's fleet against fleet. Any way you cut it, these battles make for incredible television, as well as a great use of special effects. While each ship has its own unique design with attributes that set it apart, some are simply more powerful than others. The question is, how do they stack up against each other, and which one do you want in a fight? I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are Star Trek's 10 most powerful ships. Number 10. Hadar Fighter. The Dominion ruled the Gamma Quadrant side of the wormhole in DS9. They were content to live their lives as they always had until ships from the Alpha Quadrant started arriving in their territory. Some were explorers, some were looking to set up colonies, others had far more nefarious purposes. Regardless of their intentions, the Dominion quickly tired of the Alpha Quadrant interlopers and launched a full-scale war against their neighbours. The Hadar Fighter was the backbone of the Dominion's fleet. They were fast, manoeuvrable, and outgunned pretty much everything in their path. Otherwise, they were quite Spartan in their design. These fighters were used to maintain the Dominion's dominance over their territories in the Gamma Quadrant and factored heavily into their plans in the Alpha Quadrant. The first time Starfleet encountered Hadar fighters, a Galaxy-class starship that fought them was incapable of destroying one. But one of the fighters took out the starship with a suicide run. Sometimes it's more about who is flying the ship than the ship itself. Number 9. The Raran, or the Klingon Bird of Prey. Few ships in the entire Star Trek universe strike fear into the hearts of their enemies like a Klingon bird of prey. When one decloaks in front of your ship, there's a high probability that you're in for a fight you're about to lose badly. While a bird of prey, like the Raran commanded by General Martok, is by no means the biggest ship in the Klingon fleet, they are one of the most effective and the most versatile. It's filled with a variety of roles, but best known for its use in combat missions. There's a reason why it had the reputation that it did, and why it was in service for the Empire for almost a century. There were two factors that made a bird of prey so deadly. First, it was heavily armed, featuring at least 2 disruptors and 2 photon torpedo launchers, but what gave Klingon ships the edge in any fight was their cloaking devices. You literally never saw them coming. The only downside was that weapons and shields couldn't be used while cloaked. When a bird of prey decloaked, there was a brief moment of downtime before they could put their shields up and the ship was vulnerable. It took a hell of a marksman on the other ship to take advantage of the window, but it did happen. Number 8. Breen warship. The Breen are not the best known species in Star Trek. The main time they played a role of significance in any series was on DS9 during the Dominion War. As the conflict wore on, the Dominion-Cardassian alliance was unable to bring reinforcements from the Gamma Quadrant. That's when they turned to the Breen Confederacy. They had long been trading partners with the Cardassians, one of the few Alpha Quadrant species willing to deal with them. But the Cardassians also didn't completely trust the Breen, as they had also been known to shoot down Cardassian ships and use their crews as slaves. What the Breen brought to the war could not be ignored though. Breen warships were equipped with energy dissipators. These weapons disabled an enemy's engines, shields, and weapons, effectively leaving an opponent's ship defenseless and unable to run away. While the Allied Federation, Klingon, and Romulan fleet eventually worked out a way to defend against the dissipators, the Breen warships were still a game changer for a time. Number 7. Ghadar-class Cardassian warship. Of all the antagonistic races in the Star Trek universe, it's entirely possible that the Cardassians may be among the worst of them all. They occupied Bajor for 50 years, strip mining their resources and killing millions in the process. The Cardassians were also the first species to sell the Alpha Quadrant out to the Dominion, but they do make a decent warship. The Ghadar-class cruiser was a mainstay of the Cardassian fleet for years. They were heavily armed and surprisingly versatile, which made them perfect for any number of operations. In many cases, that meant suppressing Bajoran resistance cells and fighting the Federation. Still, these were the ships that helped build and maintain the Cardassian Union for many years. Eventually, the Keldon-class cruisers were developed and purported to be the superior to the Ghadar-class, but they carried less armaments than their Ghadar counterparts and seemed to fare much more poorly in battle. Despite Cardassian military rhetoric, the Ghadar-class cruiser was the ship that defined an empire. Number 6. The USS Defiant. The Defiant represented the first time that Starfleet developed a ship specifically for the purpose of combat. After encountering the Jem'Hadar and their fighters for the first time, and losing a Galaxy-class starship in the process, Sisko knew he needed more firepower. As such, he pulled a prototype ship out of mothballs called the Defiant. Technically categorized as an escort vessel, the Defiant was designed solely for war, a role it took to quickly. A smaller ship than most in Starfleet, the Defiant class was overpowered for its size. Since it was originally designed to fight the Borg, that actually makes a lot of sense. The ship had 4 phaser cannons, 3 phaser emitters, 4 forward-facing torpedo launchers, and 2 aft torpedo launchers. Defensively, the Defiant-class ships had shields as well as ablative armor. But the USS Defiant had one other trick up its sleeve that the rest of its class did not. As the first and only one of its line at the time, Sisko was able to cut a deal with the Romulans to use one of their cloaking devices. The condition was that the Federation would only use said cloaking device in the Gamma Quadrant, though once war broke out, the Romulans were a lot more lenient on that rule. After the first USS Defiant was destroyed in combat with the Breen, no other ships in that class ever had a cloaking device that we know of, but even without that capability, it remained one of the toughest ships in Starfleet. Number 5. Diderotix class Romulan Warbird. The Romulans are possibly the coldest, most calculating and least trusting species in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. They look similar to Vulcans, except they're more dominated by paranoia and a desire to rule the galaxy than their cousins. That's probably why they developed a ship like the Warbird. Like the Klingons, the Romulans have been around since the original series. After a 53-year hiatus from the affairs of the Alpha Quadrant, the Romulans reappeared on the Next Generation when a Warbird decloaked in front of the Enterprise D. It was a disconcerting moment for all involved, as no one knew what the Romulans wanted or how powerful their ships were. Diderotix Warbirds were as dangerous a ship as you're going to find in Star Trek. They're large, powerful, and heavily armed. On top of that, every Romulan ship is equipped with a cloaking device, meaning this beast can appear out of nowhere and open fire. But they prefer subterfuge to open combat, so they're more likely to stay cloaked and watch what's going on. Number 4. The Galaxy class. Starfleet's Galaxy-class starships were one of the toughest ever designed and put into use by the Federation. It's also one of the most familiar starship designs to fans, as the class of ship as the Enterprise D was on the Next Generation. In addition to being one of the largest classes of ships in the fleet, the Galaxy class was also one of the most devastating in combat. They could have up to 14 phaser arrays, 2 photon torpedo launchers, and often carried an array of antimatter mines. Galaxy-class starships like the Enterprise D were designed to be self-sufficient when on long missions. One of the more fun tricks of the Enterprise D, having at its disposal, was splitting into 2 separate ships. The saucer section could detach, turning one ship into 2. This gave the Enterprise D the option of putting the civilians on board the saucer section and sending them to safety, while the crew continued to fight by running the aft section from the battle bridge. At least 2 different Galaxy-class ships had this option. Number 3. The IKnagar. When the Klingons were concerned about the Dominion invading Cardassia, they showed up at Deep Space Nine with a massive fleet. It was led by Chancellor Gowron's new flagship, the IKnagar. Decloaking the Nagvar in front of the station made for one hell of an impression. This class of vessel was one of the biggest put into production by the Klingon Empire. It was immense in size, dwarfing pretty much everything else in the fleet. It boasted several disruptors and photon torpedo launchers, giving it a devastating array of weapons to work with. Plus, it had a cloaking device, like virtually every other Klingon ship. The biggest impact the Nagvar had on the battlefield was how intimidating it was, particularly when surrounded by birds of prey and Vorkshok cruisers. The ship could park itself just off the outer perimeter of a station like Deep Space Nine and pummel it into submission, which it almost did on one occasion. Number 2. Jem'Hadar Battleship. While the most common Jem'Hadar ship to run into was the Fighter, they also had battleships in play. A Jem'Hadar battleship was not the most agile ship in space, nor is it the fastest, but that's not the point. The entire point of a ship like this was sitting in one spot and pummeling its opponents with torpedoes. These battleships had 10 or more photon launchers, meaning that it could let an endless barrage of the destructive weapons loose. The first Federation vessel to encounter a Jem'Hadar battleship was the USS Valiant, which was summarily destroyed. The crew of the Valiant, a Defiant-class ship, estimated that battleship was 3 times the size of a Galaxy-class vessel like the Enterprise D and 2 times more powerful. Jem'Hadar battleships were not easy to escape from, and even harder to destroy. When combined with the nimble Jem'Hadar fighters, they made devastating 1-2 combination that was enough to take on the enemies of the Dominion. Number 1. Borg Cube. A Borg Cube is one of the most ominous sights in space, simply because it's virtually indestructible. It's a prime example of how the crew make the ship, a fact that's more true in this case than not. On its own, a Borg Cube is pretty impressive. They are massive ships loaded with an incredible variety of weapons and defensive capabilities. A cube is so powerful that being attacked is barely a concern. It frequently stops in a fight to take cross-sections from enemy ships to study and learn them. But it's not the size or the weapons that make Borg Cubes so deadly. The Borg operate as a hive mind, with thousands of beings plugged into the system. All individuality is is lost. Because of this, a Borg Cube is able to retract and adapt to new threats incredibly quickly. A cube is, in many ways, a virtually unstoppable juggernaut. They seek to assimilate all species they encounter, adding their diversity and strength to the collective. Every victory makes the whole that much more powerful. The few victories that anyone has over a cube have happened thanks to the extreme levels of creativity in combat and with a lot of sacrifices. That's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much to Ian Goodwiley, who wrote the article on which this video is based. You can check that out over on whatculture.com. You can follow us on the various socials at TrekCulture and at TrekCultureYT on Instagram. I'm at Sean Ferrick. You'll find me on the various socials too. Whatever you're doing until I see you again, make sure that you live long and prosper. Treat yourself with kindness. Treat those around you with kindness. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Please also share this video if you can. In the meantime, look after yourself and be kind, because why not? Thanks very much.